blistering heat has killed dozens of people across South Korea since the past weekend, while temperatures are expected to be even higher tomorrow. And it's not just a story unfolding here, as scorching heat is hitting elsewhere around the globe. We take a closer view on what's behind North Korea boasting its closer ties with Russia, in particular during its latest military review amid speculation about their weapons dealing. COVID-19 is on the rise again in South Korea, with the daily average caseload topping 45,000 for the past week. It's July 31st, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We start with the extreme heat here in South Korea that's becoming more of a problem. Over the weekend, at least 17 people tragically lost their lives due to heat-related causes, with daytime highs in some areas reaching almost 39 degrees Celsius. The heat wave barely shows signs of abating for the next couple of days. Our Song Yu-jin starts us off.
The sweltering weather in South Korea over the weekend has led to the deaths of at least 17 people. Most of those who passed away were in their 60s or older, and some were even found dead either inside greenhouses or on farms. Heat wave alerts have been in effect for several days across most parts of the country, leading to people suffering from heat stroke, heat exhaustion, and heat cramps.
South Korea is currently under the effects of the North Pacific high-pressure system and the Tibetan high-pressure system. Both are warm, which is why we're experiencing this heat wave.
But there are no signs of relief from this scorching heat. So the country felt the scorching heat on Monday as well, with daytime high temperatures ranging between 29 to 35 degrees Celsius. Here in capital Seoul, the mercury soared to 34 degrees Celsius. But due to intense sunlight and high humidity, the Korea Meteorological Administration has warned that it'll feel even hotter. The KMA predicts that blistering temperatures will persist for more than a week, with daytime highs expected to exceed 33 degrees Celsius until next Thursday. In light of this extreme heat, the Ministry of the Interior and Safety has taken action, ordering local governments and relevant authorities to come up with measures to ensure the safety of 3 vulnerable groups during this period. These include elderly farmers, elderly individuals living alone, and outdoor construction workers. People are advised to avoid outdoor activities as much as possible and keep themselves hydrated. For those working on farms, it's important to avoid working for long hours and working alone, and stay away from greenhouses. 송유진, Arirang News.
And it's not just a story unfolding here. The world is reeling under blistering heat, with this July likely to be the hottest month on record globally. Millions in the U.S. are under heat warnings, while a typhoon has hit northern China and wildfires are devastating Greece. Our Ji-young has more.
For many in the U.S., it's just too hot to go outside. Tens of millions of people were under excessive heat warnings and oppressive humidity over the weekend, with the mercury rising well above 38 degrees Celsius in many parts of the country. The heat index reached 39 degrees Celsius in New York City, where the authorities encouraged residents to use cooling centers.
It's unreal. I can't believe it. It's too hot. It's just too hot.
I feel like I can't go anywhere without sweating, and I feel like I really can't go anywhere without sweating. In the subway station's a sauna. Like it's free, but it doesn't feel good. It does not feel good.
Not only individuals, but the heat wave is also taking toll on businesses as well. In Texas, which is experiencing record-breaking heat waves, those operating small and medium-sized businesses in the tourism, entertainment, and recreation sectors, where many work outdoors, worked 20% fewer hours from mid-June and mid-July this year compared to 2019 and 2022, according to an economist. And it's not just the U.S. China has also seen volatile weather this summer. Some parts, including the Xinjiang region, have seen some of the most brutal summer heat in recent years, reporting temperatures as high as 52 degrees Celsius earlier this month. China was also slammed by Typhoon Doksuri over the weekend, with more than 31,000 people being evacuated from the capital, Beijing. Meanwhile, a total of 667 fires have broken out across Greece in the past 10 days, including 10 major ones. The island of Rhodes, known for its resorts, have been especially hard hit, with 20,000 vacationers evacuating the island earlier this month due to the wildfires. 엄지영, Arirang News.
President Yoon will take a week-long summer vacation starting Wednesday before taking on state business for the second half of the year. A presidential aide told reporters Monday that Yoon's official holiday period will be 6 nights and 7 days, including the weekend, although the president plans to attend key events when necessary. The official added that it was Yoon's staff who suggested the break after a month of intensive work, including overseas trips as well. During his time off, the president plans to stay on Ddu-Du Island in Gyeongsangnam-do province. Managed by the Defense Ministry, Ddu-Du Island has long been a vacation spot for South Korean leaders and has a presidential villa called Cheonghae-dae. COVID-19 cases have been rebounding in recent days here in Korea in what appears to be a summer surge sparked by waning immunity and public activity. Our Moon Hae-ryun reports.
COVID-19 is showing a resurgence here in South Korea, with the number of cases rising for 4 weeks straight, which could throw a wrench in the government's plans to lower its risk rating. Data released by the Central Disease Control Headquarters on Sunday show that cases rose by more than 35% during the third week of July compared to the week before. Figures for July have shown significant increases week by week, rising from just over 150,000 in the first week to the latest figure of 253,000, meaning that the number of cases has seen a more than 60% rise over 3 weeks. Daily figures are hovering near the 50,000 mark, hitting over 47,000 on July 19th. It's the highest daily tally seen in the country since November last year, when daily figures peaked above 54,000. The current dominant subvariant of the virus in circulation is XBB 1.5, and while the vaccine against this new strain is set to be made available in South Korea in October, the low vaccine rate seen last winter among those aged 60 and over means that this may not be so effective for herd immunity. Experts say that this, coupled with the hot weather, is contributing to the rise in cases.
The rise in numbers can be attributed to the XBB strain, as well as the fact that the government has now proclaimed it an endemic, prompting people to return to normal life without masks. The heat means that more people are choosing not to wear masks too.
The latest data comes as the government announced last Wednesday its plans to lower COVID-19's risk rating to the lowest level on the infectious diseases risk classification scale as part of its 3-step endemic roadmap. Currently is ranked Class 2, which is the second highest rating alongside other highly infectious and high-risk diseases like cholera and tuberculosis. Being downgraded to Class 4 means that people will no longer have to report to the authorities within 24 hours of testing positive, and the indoor mask mandate at hospitals and nursing homes will be lifted. With it looking likely that numbers will continue to rise in the second half of the year, the government may need to form contingency plans.
The number of cases will rise exponentially when the weather gets colder and less humid, and when school starts up again in September. The government's plans to halt testing and cut financial support doesn't seem appropriate at this stage.
The Korea Center for Disease Control and Prevention will be monitoring the recent data and holding an advisory committee meeting before it implements the decision early in August. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Amid high inflation in the country, real wages in South Korea have dropped for 3 consecutive months. According to the Ministry of Employment and Labor on Monday, the average monthly income per employee of companies with more than 1 regular staff in May was 3.7 million won, which is $2,900. This is a 3.1% increase year-on-year, but after adjusting for inflation, it was a 0.2% drop. The total real wage from January to May decreased by 1.7% compared to the previous year, which is the first decline in 6 years. Possibly as early as this year, 100 prospective nannies or home helps from overseas may be coming to Seoul to work. The Ministry of Employment and Labor has proposed a plan that will allow the employment of foreign nationals for childcare and to do housework. Currently, only non-Koreans who already possess a long-term visa are able to work in these areas. But the ministry is looking into seeking the issuance of non-professional employment visas to workers from abroad. The government will consider applicants' experience and linguistic ability and ensure that they don't have a criminal record. This would hopefully lessen the burden on parents and induce them to have more children, thereby helping overcome the country's low birth rate. The plan is expected to be finalized in the third quarter and implemented soon after. Recently, North Korea has been focusing on strengthening relations with Russia in particular, at a time when Moscow is increasingly isolated from the international community since its invasion of Ukraine. Our foreign affairs correspondent Ji explains what's behind this.
After around 3 years of isolation during the COVID-19 pandemic, North Korea is slowly resuming foreign diplomatic activity. Delegations from Russia and Chinese were recently invited to Pyongyang, and throughout the military parade held last Thursday, Kim Jong-un was seen constantly talking and exchanging smiles with the Russian Defense Minister, Sergei Shoigu, and Chinese Communist Party Politburo member Lee Hong-jung. South Korea's Unification Ministry expressed strong regret over last week's parade and assessed that the event seems to have been the North's attempt to show its solidarity with Beijing and Moscow.
North Korea needs to put a stop to its nuclear development program and provocations and take the right path to achieve denuclearization, peace and prosperity on the Korean peninsula.
The North especially seems to be focusing on strengthening relations with Russia. The regime's propaganda weekly newspaper 통일신보 on Saturday featured a significantly higher number of photos of the Russian defense minister, while paying relatively less attention to the Chinese official. Its state-run newspaper also carried almost 3 times more the number of photos of the Russian delegation compared to those of the Chinese delegation. This comes at a time when Russia has no other choice but to strengthen cooperation with the North, as it's isolated from the international community, whereas China is trying to be more careful, in line with its recent efforts to manage the intense rivalry with the U.S. Meanwhile, on recent speculation that the North is supplying weapons to Russia, the Defense Ministry explains that any type of weapons trade with North Korea is banned under UN Security Council resolutions, and noted that the government is closely monitoring the situation.
Our government's stance remains that illegal weapons trade with North Korea, which violates UN Security Council sanctions against North Korea and harms the international community's peace and security, must stop immediately.
Pundits say the North's recent move shows that blocs are indeed solidifying in the region, as South Korea, U.S., and Japan are also working to strengthen three-way security cooperation, as leaders of the 3 countries are set to hold a summit in Washington next month. This shows that both Koreas appear to be shifting from what was described as strategic ambiguity to take clearer steps in diplomacy. Arirang News.
In other news, Saudi Arabia will reportedly host Ukraine peace talks next month. Western countries, Kyiv, and major developing countries like India and Brazil have been invited, but not Russia. Chung Eun-ju has more.
Saudi Arabia is set to host peace talks in August among Western countries, Ukraine, and key developing nations, including India and Brazil. The meeting comes as Europe and Washington intensify efforts to consolidate international support for Ukraine's peace demands. The Wall Street Journal first reported on Saturday, citing diplomats involved, that the meeting would bring senior officials from up to 30 countries, which include Indonesia, Egypt, and Mexico, among others, to the Red Sea port city of Jeddah, tentatively on the 5th and 6th of August. According to the report, Ukraine and Western officials are hoping the talks, which exclude Russia, will lead to international backing for peace terms favoring Ukraine. It's not yet clear how many countries will attend, but the report said countries that took part in a similar round of talks in Copenhagen in June are expected to do so again. Britain, South Africa, Poland, and the EU are among those who have confirmed their attendance, as has United States National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Meanwhile, Russia has said it views peace talks with Ukraine would only be possible if Kyiv accepts the new realities, a reference to the country's claims to have annexed around a sixth of Ukraine. Conversely, Kyiv says negotiations with Moscow can only take place after Russia withdraws its troops. Ukraine has also previously said its 10-point peace formula should be taken as a basis, which further includes the restoration of its territorial integrity, the release of all prisoners, a tribunal for those responsible for the aggression, and security guarantees for the country. Arab nations have largely remained neutral since Russia launched the war on Ukraine in February 2022, in part due to their military and economic ties to Moscow. 정은주, Arirang News.
K-pop girl group BLACKPINK has set a new record with the music video to Ddu-Du reaching 2.1 billion views on YouTube. Announced by the band's label YG Entertainment on Monday, the milestone was reached approximately 5 years and 1 month after the song's release on June 2018. Surpassing 2.1 billion views has set a historic record among K-pop artists as the best and fastest record for any K-pop group. BLACKPINK has been continuously breaking its own record on YouTube, living up to its reputation as the artist with the most YouTube subscribers in the world. Time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. Joining us in the studio is our sports editor, Paul Need. Hello, Paul.
Hello there.
So let's first start with fencing. Korea's women's team earned a medal at the World Championships.
Yes, that's right. They won bronze at the World Championships in Italy on Sunday. Korea's team of Yoon Ji-soo, John Hae-young, John Eun-hae and Chae Se-bin finished behind Hungary and France on the podium. They beat Turkey 45-21 in the round of 16 and then Azerbaijan 45-43 in the quarterfinals before losing 39-45 to Hungary in the semis. The competition was cancelled in 2020 and 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and so this is Korea's first medal since 2019 when they also won bronze.
And moving on to football, it looks like South Korea's women's team needs more than a miracle in order to advance the knockout stages of the World Cup.
Yes, I'm afraid so. Korea lost 1-0 to Morocco on Sunday to make it 2 straight defeats to start this World Cup. In Adelaide, Australia on Sunday, a glancing header from Morocco striker Ibtissam Jraidi on 6 minutes was enough to earn her country the 3 points. This now means that Korea need to beat Germany by a margin of more than 6 goals to reach the knockouts. Korea, of course, are yet to score in the World Cup so far, having played against teams ranked below Germany, who are one of the tournament favourites. Manager Colin Bell blamed the defeat on the domestic WK League's lack of intensity and lack of a promotion relegation system, adding it's time to rethink the whole league format. Korea face Germany on Thursday at 7 p.m. Korea time in what will be their final group stage match.
And meanwhile, here in Seoul, 2 European giants took part in an exhibition game on Sunday.
Yes, that's right. It was Manchester City and Atletico Madrid. And they were here and they experienced the Korea summer monsoon as well. They did so firsthand. The pre-season friendly match ended 2-1 to Atletico thanks to goals from Memphis Depay and Yannick Carrasco. Ruben Diaz scored for City. But the game was delayed for over 40 minutes due to torrential downpours waterlogging the pitch, making it unplayable. The match was part of the Kupang Play series, which also saw a team of K-League All-Stars beat Atletico 3-2 on Thursday.
And to the baseball now, bad news for San Diego Padres star Kim Ha-sung.
Yes, he's picked up a shoulder injury, unfortunately. This forced him off the field on Sunday against the Texas Rangers. The injury was sustained while sliding at home plate. Kim slid in head first, but his right hand got stuck underneath the left knee of Rangers catcher Sam Huff. He is, according to Yonhap News, considered day-to-day in terms of his injury status. The Padres did at least win the game 5-3. But one Korean star in MLB that's due to return from injury is Ryu Hyun-jin. Toronto Blue Jays manager John Schneider has been quoted as saying he's ready to roll, push the go button and don't look back. Ryu's long-awaited return will be on Tuesday, August the 1st, against the Baltimore Orioles at home. Ryu has missed over a year of Major League Baseball after suffering an elbow injury in June 2022.
And Paul, finally to swimming now. South Korea's men's team was able to set a new record, national record, in the 400-meter medley.
Yes, you're right, by a narrow margin, but it does count, of course. On Sunday in Fukuoka, Japan, South Korea's team of backstroke, Lee Ju-ho, breaststroke, Chae Dong-yeol, butterfly, Kim Young-bom, and freestyle, Hwang Sun-woo set a time of 3 minutes 34.25 seconds. The time is 0.71 seconds quicker than the previous record set earlier this year. The team finished 10th out of 22 and was unable to advance to the finals, but was able to move up to 8th in the world rankings. They had been 13th at the Budapest Games last year.
All right, thanks for this. See you next week.
Thank you. See you.
Unrelenting heat will continue to sweep across the nation. Heatwave alerts are currently issued nationwide and most inland regions are under warnings. This means that sensible temperatures have exceeded 35 degrees Celsius. This kind of severe heat can lead to serious illnesses such as heat exhaustion and even heat stroke. Take plenty of rest and try to stay indoors. As you can see, temperatures will stay scorching hot until Wednesday. Highs will be staying around the 35-degree mark, but keep in mind that conditions will feel hotter than the actual readings. Tropical nights are also expected here in Seoul with lows of over 25 degrees. Under extreme heat and blazing sunshine, UV ray index will be extremely high tomorrow. The entire nation will see UV ray index in the very high range. To avoid any skin aggravation, make sure to wear plenty of sunblock and try to stay indoors. Morning temperatures in Seoul will be starting off at 27 degrees. And sweltering conditions are expected for the daytime. Highs in Seoul will get up to 35. Daejeon, Gwangju, Daegu, and Gyeongju will be topping out at 36 degrees. For the remainder of the work week, the capital region will see sunny skies. That's all for now, and to the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
I'm live. 저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들
아무리 봐도 이거 먹지 텐션 같은데 아니라고 아무도 안 하는 거고
좋아요.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Welcome to Korea and Arirang for a K-pop word.
Ready to enjoy a fun Monday K-pop tour with K?
웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Hello everyone, it's Monday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. China's outspoken former foreign minister Qin Gang has been removed from office after a months-long disappearance, and experienced diplomat Wang Yi is back. Reasons for the shakeup remain veiled, but as Wang Yi served as a foreign minister for roughly a decade and has deeper understanding of South Korea, many are expecting ties between Seoul and Beijing to show improvement. But will they really? In what direction will China's foreign policy go? And does this hint that Xi Jinping's more consolidated power is expanding into diplomacy? To talk about this, we have Professor Choi Hyun-jin from Kyung University in the studio. Professor Choi, welcome.
Good evening, Bo-kyung.
Good evening. And we also have Professor Mason Ritchie from Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Professor Ritchie, thank you for your time.
Great, thanks for having me.
All right, now first question to our Professor Choi. Now, Qin Gang has been replaced with Wang Yi. Before we delve deeper into the details, I'd like to first ask our Professor Choi about the operation of China's foreign diplomacy. So Wang Yi is currently the director of the Foreign Affairs Commission of the ruling Chinese Communist Party. Does his role include giving orders to foreign ministers?
Yes, Wang Yi is currently a member of the Political Bureau of the Chinese Communist Party and also director of the Communist Party's Office of the Foreign Affairs Commission. And this office exercises general oversight on foreign policy issues of China. And the foreign relations law of China states that this commission is responsible for policymaking, deliberation, and also the coordination for the conduct of Chinese foreign relations. And the law also states that this commission formulates the China's foreign relations strategy and the major principles providing guidelines to foreign ministry. And therefore, you're right, even before he returns to Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he was in a higher position that designs, coordinates, and also supervises the implementation of Chinese foreign policy.
Right, I see. Now, Professor Ritchie, ousted former Foreign Minister Qin Gang was known for his wolf warrior diplomacy style, but after his month-long absence, he was eventually replaced. Now, what do you believe was the main reason behind such replacement?
So I'm going to do something I shouldn't do and be completely honest with you and tell you that I actually don't know the answer to that question. There are a lot of rumors. One of them is that he has a health issue. That's sort of been the quasi-official line, so to speak. Although the Chinese Communist Party hasn't really given a reason for his removal from the position of foreign minister. It seems like that might be unlikely given the fact that mention of him has been scrubbed from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs website. So even past meetings that he participated in, have now been blanked. And the sense seems to be that there's more going on than just a. Some other possibilities include, rather salaciously, a potential liaison, romantic liaison with a mistress in Hong Kong. Although, again, it's not necessarily the case that that type of indiscretion would result in this type of, very quick disappearance from view and removal from office. It's not impossible, but it's certainly not the first thing that one might think of. There's a possibility that perhaps there was some type of diplomatic faux pas that was serious enough that he made when Antony Blinken and he were meeting recently, and that might have led to it in some way. And then, of course, there's a possibility of bureaucratic infighting within the Chinese Communist Party, within the circle around Xi Jinping, and within the foreign ministry and within the Foreign Affairs Commission in the Chinese Communist Party. If I had to bet, I would probably bet it's the last of those, or perhaps a mixture of several of those things, where perhaps infighting led to the use of dirt against him in order to have him removed. I think what's interesting about this is perhaps not so much in itself the reason for Qin Gang's removal, I think that it says something perhaps about the consolidation of power of Xi Jinping. And one way to read this is that Wang Yi has now come back into power in the foreign ministry as foreign minister. But as we just heard, that's not really where the power lays, because the foreign minister is really there to implement policy. What I think might be going on here is that this represents bureaucratic infighting that perhaps damages Xi Jinping a little bit. Qin Gang was known to be very close to Xi Jinping. That's how he got that position as foreign minister, and it was well known that within the foreign ministry he wasn't appreciated very much, wasn't liked very much, and was seen as being a usurper of the position of foreign minister too quickly because of his direct connection to Xi Jinping. So if it's the case that in fact he was removed because of bureaucratic infighting, that might be seen in some ways as going against the wishes and the connections to Xi Jinping, which might indicate that there's a chink in Xi Jinping's armor, which in some ways we haven't seen in a while. In any event, I think this damages China's international reputation. It shows the opacity of the regime. And if I were an investor, for instance, looking at China, I would look at this as one more negative data point in whether or not I should be invested in China in terms of business because of the political risk.
Right, I see. We'll never know the truth behind the reason of Qin Gang's such replacement, but as our Professor Richie told us, there could be many possibilities and the reasons. Now, Professor Chit, so usually senior Chinese officials who have disappeared from public view are revealed to have been detained for, investigation by the Chinese Communist Party's disciplinary watchdog months later. Do you believe this is also the case for Qin Gang as well?
And as you said, some senior Chinese officials have disappeared for several months and later revealed that they have been detained for investigation by the Communist Party. And such sudden disappearance have become a common feature of Chinese politics, especially during Xi Jinping's anti-corruption campaign. For example, in September 2018, Meng Hongwei, a former Chinese politician and the head of the International Criminal Police Organization, that is Interpol, suddenly disappeared while he was traveling to China. And about 10 days later, it became known that the China's National Inspection Commission was detaining him, and he was eventually convicted of bribery and other charges and also imprisoned. And in an interview 3 years later, his wife said the history of sudden disappearance by power is repeating itself. And therefore, it is somehow understandable to suspect that this kind of disappearance and investigation happened to Qin Gang as well, although we have no such evidence right now. And just 2 weeks ago, there was a question about Qin Gang's prolonged absence at a press briefing, and there, a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said that she had no information to provide. And therefore, I think this kind of disappearance and also lots of rumors are driven by a lack of transparency in the Chinese political system, where information is closely censored and important decisions are mostly made behind closed doors.
Right, I see. So there could be possibility that Qin Gang is detained for investigation, but we'll never know. Right. Now, Professor Richie, let's turn our focus to Wang Yi. Why Wang Yi? I mean, is it his experience serving as a foreign minister for 10 years that has resulted in his appointment once again? And now that he is foreign minister, a member of the Politburo of the Chinese Communist Party, and director of Foreign Affairs Commission of the party as well, is this a usual position one can get?
Certainly, having this portfolio of mandates, especially the way that it's happened so suddenly, and in the case of Wang Yi returning to a previous post that he's already held, is indeed unusual. And that's, I think, again, part of the reason why I see the disappearance of Qin Gang and the removal of him as foreign minister as being a sign of trouble within the Chinese Communist Party and within the government of China, rather than an expansion of Xi Jinping's power. Again, this could all ultimately just be driven by a health issue, but it doesn't necessarily seem that that's the most likely scenario. So, what I think is going on with the appointment of Wang Yi again as foreign minister to replace the suddenly removed Qin Gang is to simply have a safe pair of hands. I think the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping and his close circle realized that, the disappearance of Qin Gang from public view when he was still foreign minister, and then, of course, the very sudden and inexplicable removal does damage China's reputation a little bit. And having Wang Yi come back in, he's a known quantity by diplomats and leaders all over the world. He's a known quantity for business leaders, and I think this is a way to message stability after this symbol or symptom of some type of instability potentially within the Chinese Communist foreign policy apparatus. But if I had to guess, I would say that Wang Yi won't hold the position of foreign minister for an extremely long time. I would think that, in fact, this is largely considered to be a temporary measure in order to set up someone else to come in and succeed him and take over, since Wang Yi's done this before, and as I mentioned earlier, Wang Yi's energies, as senior as he is, should now be largely put into foreign policy design, which is what his current position in the Politburo and in the Foreign Affairs Commission of the party is for, rather than policy implementation, which is largely what the foreign ministry and the foreign minister are for.
Right, I see. So this is a temporary measure just until the new person can take over Qin Gang's position. All right, now, Professor Che, some point out that this reshuffle is an expansion of the diplomatic domain of Xi Jinping's leadership, with the party exercising more control over the government. What's your view on this?
I somehow disagree with this kind of interpretation. So I don't think that this reshuffle was intentional or pre-planned for Xi Jinping's leadership. So we need to remember that Qin Gang was fired after just 7 months in office. It was the shortest tenure of a foreign minister since the founding of modern China in 1949. And Xi Jinping's decision to remove Qin Gang after such a short period of time and the reappointment of Wang Yi shows the dire international situation China is facing now. China is currently engaged in a hegemonic rivalry with the United States as its economy struggles to rebound. And this is why Wang Yi, who has extensive diplomatic experience, was brought to the foreign ministry once again to stabilize foreign policy of China. And therefore, and I think this reshuffle was not an expansion of Xi Jinping's leadership, but reflects the top leadership's urgency to stabilize foreign affairs, especially with the United States.
Interesting. Now, one more question, Professor Che. I'd like to also focus on Wang Yi's schedules right after he was reappointed as the foreign minister. He attended the BRICS National Security Advisors and High Representatives on National Security meeting last week. Now, first of all, how does China view ties with BRICS countries, and what is the reason and intention behind China's such solidifying and intensifying ties with developing countries?
So first of all, BRICS is an acronym for 5 emerging economies, including Brazil, Russia, India, China, and also South Africa. So he attended the BRICS high-level security ministers meeting in South Africa on July 25th. And Wang Yi, during this meeting, Wang Yi said that we must resist unilateralism and hegemonic practice and oppose the destruction of multilateral cooperation by close and exclusive small groups. And I guess here, this close and exclusive small group means the United States and NATO. And he also added that China will promote more substantive cooperation with the BRICS partners to counter global security challenges. And this shows that China sees the BRICS as a key pillar of a multipolar system system that can challenge the Western-centered unipolar system led by the United States. And here, the multipolar system means international politics where the multiple great powers with relatively equal strengths compete and cooperation each other. So Wang's comments can be seen as a call for a greater cooperation among BRICS members to counter the United States and NATO, which are casting a wide net of security and economic measures to contain China. And by the way, also it is important to know that the the other members other than these BRICS members, such as Belarus, Iran, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and also attended this BRICS meeting to discuss cybersecurity issues. And this shows that China's willingness and also intention of solidifying relations with larger groups of developing countries beyond the BRICS.
Right, I see. So China is aiming for a multipolar system in terms of international politics arena, and that is the reason why it is solidifying ties with developing countries. All right, now Professor Ritchie, meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin is scheduled to visit China during the Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation in October. Now, what does that suggest?
I think that just suggests the continuation of the strategic partnership between Moscow and Beijing. Obviously, those two countries have become, in some ways, closer to each other ever since the Ukraine war has started. Of course, the strategic partnership predates that, and they were coming closer together even prior to that, of course. But China is, of course, using Russia's isolation opportunistically in its own way in order to increase its leverage over Russia, notably in terms of economic cooperation, where China can benefit from oil and gas as well as from other trading and commercial relations with Russia. And of course, in Russia's case, it really requires, given its isolation, China as a backstop, as a strategic partner and benefactor who can help keep Russia plugged in to the global economy. And so this is important commercially for Russia as well. And of course, also diplomatically, it's very important for China to have Russia's diplomatic back, so to speak, at the United Nations and in other international, multilateral fora. So I don't think that there's anything particularly significant about this related to Qin Gang's ouster. I think this is just a normal continuation of the strategic partnership. And of course, from China's perspective, they're going to want some type of update from Russia about what's going on in Ukraine. They're going to want to know more about the status of the front in Ukraine, the possibilities for off-ramps from this Ukraine war, and what those might look like.
Right, I see. Now, Professor Che, what matters is also the ties between China and the U.S., and now that Wang Yi has returned, how do you expect the relationship between Beijing and Washington to be?
Yeah, so while media have expressed interest in Chinese foreign policy under Wang Yi, but personally, I see the little chance of any breakthrough in the relationship between China and the United States. The Wang Yi already served as a foreign minister before Qin Gang, so his return to the office is unlikely to significantly change the direction of China's foreign policy toward the U.S. And in addition, the reappointment of Wang Yi would not change the structural causes of rivalry between the two countries, such as a competition over the global semiconductor value chain. Though Wang Yi also has been a center of a hawkish foreign policy as well. And although he's known for some friendliness and flexibility, but I think he's no different from Xi Jinping in his pursuit of China-centered hegemony and also nationalist beliefs. So for example, in the last February, he met with the U.S. Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, in Germany. And during the meeting, both ministers openly argued over Chinese spy balloon incident incident, the balloon which was shot down by America. And as a result of this, the relation between the United States and China rapidly soured. And of course, the U.S. State Department officially announced that it looked forward to the high-level talks between the two countries, but I do not find any specific reasons to expect an improvement in bilateral relations in the near future.
Right. Well, how about ties between Seoul and Beijing? I mean, some experts point out that Wang Yi's return could offer greater momentum for bilateral ties because Wang Yi has deeper understanding of South Korea. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I partly agree. So unlike the United States, South Korea has some reason to hope for improved relation with China with Wang Yi's return. Wang Yi is known to have a strong understanding of South Korea. So he visited Korea 5 times since taking over as foreign minister in 2014. And also, there was a conflict between the two countries in 2016 over the deployment of THAAD missile defense system. And during the time, the Wang Yi visited South Korea in December 2019. And this visit really helped to normalize bilateral relationship between South Korea and China. And also, Wang met with the foreign minister Park Jin in Jakarta, Indonesia on July 14 on the sidelines of the ASEAN Regional Security Forum. And both ministers emphasized strengthening bilateral communication and also rebuilding trust. And here, Wang said, we want the China-Korea Strategic Cooperation Partnership to return to a sound and stable development trajectory. And this raises some expectation for improved relations between the two countries. And some observers also expect that the possible visit of Wang Yi to South Korea in the near future could improve soured relations between the two countries.
Right, I see. Now, we are running out of time, but Professor Ritchie, I'd like to ask you this last question. So there is also expectation of a potential three-way summit between Seoul, Tokyo, and Beijing. Regular meetings between the three have been suspended since 2019, and now it is Seoul's turn to host the meeting. If it does take place, could it become a turning point for the three countries?
I would be careful about language that's that optimistic, such as turning point. But obviously, talking is better than not talking. And like many of these meetings, I think that you can sort of put a floor under the relationship so that you won't have misunderstandings that grow into bigger problems. So I think that that's certainly one outcome, probably the most likely, and at least the most likely best outcome. I think that we have to remember that, as Professor Che just mentioned, the structural factors that separate China from the United States and are fueling this rivalry. They have downstream effects on countries like South Korea and Japan, who are U.S. allies. And so the shadow of the structural rivalry between the U.S. and China is simply going to make dramatically improved relations between Seoul and Beijing, or between Tokyo and Beijing hard. But there are, of course, there's some regional security issues. North Korea can be discussed, obviously. The environment should be discussed. One of the things that probably would come up would be the Fukushima nuclear reactor water release into the Pacific Ocean. So, these are all areas where, discussions could take place that could put a floor under the relationship and hopefully prevent any misunderstandings from growing out of control.
All right, I see. Now, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition, but thank you, Professor Ritchie, for your time and insights, and Professor Che for your time and insights as well. We really appreciate it. All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
of Generation MZ has arrived. News Generation explores current issues that resonate with this distinct generation. With a fresh and soft approach, the program captures the vibrant